When you hear the word companion planting, sometimes it feels like things that are just made up, an old wives' tale from 100 years ago. Plant this with that, plant that with that, and magic things will happen. Well, the truth is there are actual science-based reasons to combine certain plants with other plants. And today we're looking at the most prized plant, at least in my garden, the tomato with—
Hey, whoa. I know you're not talking about companions and tomatoes without me.
I gotta have my own companion here. Jacques and I are gonna give you 20 plus different tomato companion plants. Not only that, but they're gonna be based on scientific validity, and they're grouped as far as their effect on the tomato plant itself, starting with probably the most annoying thing on tomatoes, pests. Oh, my first pick hits so good. It's thyme. So research from the University of Iowa shows that if you plant thyme with your tomatoes, it can deter armyworms. The scent, which smells great to me, seems to confuse them a little bit. So armyworms can mess with your tomatoes a good amount. The other thing that's nice about thyme, as you can see, it's sort of a mounding plant. So it can act as a living ground cover or living mulch, and there's a lot of good combos for tomatoes and thyme in the kitchen. Then you got these ones, the nasties, I like to call them, nasturtiums. These are basically a trap crop in the garden where a lot of aphids will come to nasturtiums instead of hitting other plants like your tomatoes. A couple of things to think about with nasturtiums. First of all, there's so many different color varieties of leaves and flowers. I think sometimes these yellow ones might be a little played out. I like to go with some of the other varieties you can see over here. But you want to also consider that when you plant your nasturtiums, you'll probably have them for many years to come, especially in warmer zones. I planted them 5 years ago. I've never planted them since, and they're all over the garden. I'm pulling a fast one on you because sunflowers aren't my next pick. It's actually the marigold, specifically the French marigold. Do not plant a cygnet marigold because it's got some other effects that we don't want near our tomatoes. But what marigolds do, first of all, they attract some beneficials, which is great, but they also release something called root exudates. So things that are coming out of the root zone that actually help deter root knot nematodes, which are a big problem with tomatoes. In fact, most of my tomatoes last year were affected by them. I would give Naughty Marietta variety a try because it's very compact and it's easy to slot in between your tomatoes. You know, one pest I didn't think I'd have much of a problem with, and it turns out I did, were stink bugs. Green stink bugs were all over the garden last year, and it was kind of a first for me. So I wanted to figure out what to do, and you can plant cowpeas, so not these kind of peas, but cowpeas next to your tomatoes. Stink bugs seem to prefer them to tomatoes, but stink bugs are also relatively strong flyers, meaning if you plant them right next to one another, they can make their way over. So I might plant them at the border of my tomato planting, making sure that I keep it just a bit further away than I might otherwise, maybe a few feet. The other thing that's nice about cowpeas is that they're very heat and drought tolerant, making them kind of a set it and forget it pest prevention method for tomatoes. If you're dealing with flea beetles, especially on your young tomatoes, they seem to like young tomatoes quite a bit, then try radishes out. Radishes are a quick growing crop. If you grow Cherry Belle, French Breakfast, some of these really fast varieties, even for radishes, it can help quite a bit because the flea beetles tend to prefer the radish leaves, and it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to sacrifice a radish than it is to sacrifice a tomato. And if they end up growing, that's great. You'll get a nice little radish harvest in about a month or so. So throw them in next to your tomatoes. They don't take up a ton of space and they could save your crop. Now, if harlequin bugs are more the problem that you're dealing with, especially in warmer climates, then you can try out collards, collard greens. Top Bunch is a good variety. There's so many great collard varieties. And the beautiful part is there's no real harm in planting them next to tomatoes. Doesn't really affect them in any way, but it does attract the harlequin bugs, which is nice. Collards also tend to grow pretty much anywhere, pretty much most of the year. It's a very forgiving crop, and if you want extra credit, especially during those warmer months when the tomatoes are liking to grow, you can plant your collards. This would be my north side here. You can plant them on the north side so that morning sun, afternoon sun shades out the collards just a bit, keeping them alive, thus keeping that trap crop alive for the harlequin bugs. I have the most cliche one for you next, which is basil. Of course, everyone knows this one, but it's not just because they work so well in the kitchen. Actually, the scent of many, if not most, basil varieties can help mask the scent of tomatoes, which is one of the signals that pests use to say, hey, I want to come snack on those tomatoes. So it's basically a masking crop, and there's so many fun varieties you can do. This, of course, is a classic Genovese basil, but you could do Petra, which is a purple one. You could do lettuce leaf basil, which grows absolutely massive and provides a bit of more of like a ground cover type of approach. But in the end, it's tomatoes and basil. You plant them together just because that's what nature intended. Now, pests aren't the only reason to plant something with a tomato. In fact, attracting beneficial insects is another great one.
If you want to grow a bounty of delicious, healthy tomatoes, you don't want to just attract pollinators, you also want to attract beneficial insects. Now, beneficial insects are exactly what they sound like. They're insects that benefit you in the garden by helping to solve some of your problems. And one of the best plants out there to do that is actually this right here, which is fennel. Both fennel and dill are essentially the same when it comes to creating their flower. They have this big, what is called the umbral flower structure that is very attractive to hoverflies, beneficial wasps, and all of those can help fight off pests that are on your tomatoes. The only thing I'll tell you is to make sure you keep your fennel and dill not planted next to your tomatoes, because once they go to seed, they will stop everything around them from growing. First, I want to take a moment and remind you guys that you can grow tomatoes in containers at home, and you can even put companion plants like this little marigold in those containers as well, as long as you have great soil. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Fox Farm Soil and Fertilizer Company. They were founded in the early 80s in Humboldt County, California, with a mission to create a soil that wasn't sterilized, but actually full of beneficial life, which is exactly what they have. And they're actually used by gardeners all over the world thanks to their fantastic soils and fertilizers. One of my favorite soils by far has always been the ocean forest. I love that it has some ocean products blended in that provide plenty of nutrients to get your plants off right. This tomato right here is planted in pure ocean forest mix in a 10-gallon grow bag, and I think the results speak for themselves. They look absolutely wonderful, and they're covered in tomatoes thanks to that added nutrient that's already in there. But they also make a whole line of fantastic organic fertilizers. So now that this plant is fruiting, I'm definitely going to be applying some because I want to make sure I get as many tomatoes as I possibly can. And they also have a whole line of other wonderful potting mixes, such as the Strawberry Fields, which has coconut coir and a little bit of extra phosphorus to encourage extra fruit development, which is exactly why I have my strawberries here planted in Strawberry Fields. So go to foxfarm.com and use their store locator to find a store near you that carries their wonderful soils and fertilizers, and for convenience, they're also available on Amazon. Now let's get back to the video and talk about more companion plants for your tomatoes. As much as I love the color and texture that snapdragons add to my garden, they're not exactly known for attracting beneficial insects, but the plant right next to it, sweet marjoram, an herb, is known for doing just that. Both sweet marjoram and oregano, which is very similar, produce wonderful blooms of flowers that cover the entire stalk of the plant. The beauty of it is that they attract beneficial wasps to your garden. These are the wasps that eat and parasitize caterpillars that eat your tomato plants. So the only thing I'll say is, as delicious as these herbs are, make sure you leave a couple stalks to grow nice and tall, because that is going to be where the flowers are. Every time I smell this, it makes me want a big old bowl of pico de gallo and some chips to dip right into it. And I'm of course speaking about cilantro. You might not recognize it in this form when it's in full flower, but cilantro is fantastic for this exact reason. The flowers are full of nectar and they attract beneficials like ladybugs. These ladybugs are fantastic at eating up all the aphids that might show up in your garden. And also this will attract little hoverflies and other sorts of great pollinators as well. Now, one of the main weaknesses of cilantro is that we like to eat it in the summer, but in the summer is when it also likes to bolt because it doesn't like the heat. So while we do want the flowers, if you want to slow that bolting a little bit more, make sure you plant your cilantro right behind your tomatoes on the north side so they're not getting blasted by that late afternoon sun. And then you should be able to get cilantro, and eventually you'll definitely get flowers. I just realized that everything I spoke about thus far is an herb. And no, we're not doing another herb, although there are many other great ones out there. Instead, we are talking about sweet alyssum. As the name suggests, it smells sweet like honey, and this thing is a powerhouse at attracting hoverflies and brachnoid wasps. Those wasps are the ones that lay their eggs inside the tomato hornworm, and then those babies hatch, eat up the entire caterpillar, and they knock out your tomato hornworm problem, and that is solved for good. So the other thing that's really great about this is that it doesn't really compete with the other plants around it. They've got shallow roots, so your tomato's gonna grow just fine, and they come in a wide range of colors. But it's not just about attracting beneficial insects. If you want to increase your yield dramatically, you want to attract more pollinators, and Kevin has some great picks for this.
Now, it might sound a bit counterintuitive to increase pollination with a tomato which has a perfect flower, meaning the male and female parts of the flower are contained within the same flower so that it pollinates itself. But the truth is you can get better fruit set and heavier yields if you plant some crops that help attract things that just slightly improve that pollination effect. So we're back over here at the sunflowers, which attract a ton of bumblebees. What they'll do is they'll go into the tomatoes and basically buzz pollinate by sort of vibrating that flower a bit. They help set that flower just a little bit more often, meaning that across an entire crop of tomatoes, you should get quite a bit more fruit. The other thing that's nice about sunflowers is they attract leaf-footed bugs, which I had a big problem with in my garden last year, instead of going to the tomatoes. Those are these little stinky bugs that will kind of stab through the leaves of the plants, leaving all these yellow spots. Very annoying, very filthy. And if you plant the sunflowers, it should take care of them. I'm just kidding, that actually doesn't have a smell. We're talking about any blue or purple flower. This is bachelor button right here. It's a beautiful one, it's amazing, it's easy to grow. Any blue or purple flower is known to attract more bees into the garden, beautifies the space, and also, of course, through that buzz pollination or just additional pollination helps to get your tomatoes to set their fruit a little bit more, which is fantastic. And it's hard to go wrong with something as beautiful as this, which is also technically an edible flower. You could pop it in a little bit of champagne, celebrate a little birthday or something like that, or just enjoy it in the garden. Now, these are some great recommendations to plant for an above the ground effect, but there are a lot of companion plants to do something below the soil.
The right companion plants aren't just going to be attracting the right things to your garden, they should also help improve your soil, whether that's by improving the fertility, retaining nutrients, or even helping to fight some diseases. In fact, right here on this row of tomatoes, I had planted out a whole row of fava beans in the winter time, and fava beans are really good at fixing nitrogen in the soil. So by the time I harvested out those favas, I've now left the roots in the ground, and that nitrogen is serving the tomato plants and everything else around them. Another great example of that is crimson clover. I've often thought about growing a patch of crimson clover and then clearing out little sections to plant tomatoes inside of, and that might actually work out pretty nicely because crimson clover is another fantastic nitrogen fixer. These next couple plants are ones that require a little bit more foresight because you actually want to grow them in the fall-winter period over into springtime when you actually plant your tomatoes. And two that come to mind right now are going to be winter rye and oats. Both of them are really good at actually suppressing any weed germination at all. So what you'll end up with is a weed-free bed to plant your tomatoes in, but they also have roots that go deep into the soil, scavenging nutrients, which then you will apply on the surface of your bed as mulch. That is the beauty behind these guys. You're basically growing your mulch exactly where you're growing your tomatoes. All you have to do is either mow it, crimp it, which means you just break it to the ground, and then you can plant your tomatoes right inside the mulch that you grew exactly where your tomatoes are. You get the benefit of improving your soil, reducing your weeds, and saving water by having that free mulch. And right behind me here in this very bed where I will soon be planting tomatoes, I actually grew a cover crop of mustard throughout the whole winter. And that is fantastic for dealing with any fungal diseases or root knot nematode issues you might have with your tomato plants. When you grow mustard and actually work it into your soil, it breaks down and it literally will kill fungal diseases in the ground, such as wilting diseases that are very, very common and annoying for tomato growers everywhere. Every plant we cover today should help your tomatoes grow either better, produce more fruit, or just help bring in more good insects to your garden. But if you want to avoid tomato problems in the first place, check out this video right here, which should solve some of your most common tomato issues.